You know, in medicine, a single decision can literally be the difference between life and death. But what if doctors didn't have to make those calls all alone? What if they had a digital co-pilot to help them navigate the absolutely overwhelming sea of medical data? Well, today we're going to dive into the technology that's quietly revolutionizing healthcare from the inside out.
So let's go back a bit. Over 2 decades ago, a huge report from the Institute of Medicine just sent shockwaves through the entire healthcare world. It pulled back the curtain on a hidden crisis in patient safety. And here's the thing that surprised everyone. The problem wasn't that doctors and nurses didn't know enough. Nope. It was that they were drowning in too much information.
So that raises the big question, right? How can we possibly help clinicians sort through this mountain of patient data, lab results, and medical articles to make the best possible call every single time? Well, the answer is found in this really powerful technology that acts as a digital co-pilot for doctors, the Clinical Decision Support System.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start by really defining what this digital co-pilot is. Then we'll look at the 2 main ways it thinks, like a librarian and like a detective. After that, we'll get into its real-world impact, the roadblocks to getting it adopted everywhere, and finally, we'll ask what the future holds for medical decisions.
All right, first things first. What exactly is this digital co-pilot? A Clinical Decision Support System, or CDSS for short, is basically a smart tool that's woven right into a doctor's daily workflow. It's all about delivering the right information for the right patient at the exact moment a decision is being made. Now, it's crucial to think of it not as a replacement for the doctor, but as a seriously powerful sidekick that enhances their own expertise.
So how do these things actually work under the hood? Well, they're not all built the same way. They generally fall into 2 main categories, and I think a good way to think about them is as 2 different kinds of experts you might call for help: the librarian and the detective.
On one hand, you have the librarian. This is what we call a knowledge-based system. It is very by the book. It follows a pre-programmed set of rules, no questions asked. On the other hand, you have the detective. This is a non-knowledge-based system, and it uses machine learning to just sift through mountains of clinical evidence, looking for new clues and hidden patterns that nobody's ever seen before.
So the librarian's process is really structured. It's a clean 3-step dance. First, it consults its knowledge base. Think of it as a huge library of medical rules. Second, its inference engine takes those rules and applies them to a specific patient's data. And third, a communication mechanism delivers the final result, which is usually a little pop-up alert or a reminder for the doctor.
And here's a perfect example of one of those simple if-then rules in action. Let's say a certain blood test was already ordered in the last 48 hours. If someone tries to order that exact same test again, the system fires off an alert to the physician. It sounds so basic, right? But that single, simple rule prevents waste, it saves money, and it spares the patient from getting stuck with a needle for no good reason.
Now the detective, that's a whole different ballgame. Instead of following rules someone wrote down, it uses things like artificial neural networks, a type of machine learning, to analyze enormous data sets. It looks at patient info, genetic markers, treatment outcomes, and it learns to spot patterns a human might never catch. But there's a big trade-off. Its reasoning can be a total black box. It might spit out the right answer, but it can't always explain why. And that is a huge problem for doctors who, have to be able to justify every single decision they make.
Okay, so we've got these 2 different players, the rule-following librarian and the pattern-finding detective. What actually happens when you unleash them in a busy, chaotic hospital? What's the real-world impact?
Well, the evidence is it's incredibly compelling. When these systems are implemented the right way, they are literal lifesavers. They act as a safety net, catching dangerous drug interactions before a pharmacist even sees the prescription. They can improve the accuracy of a diagnosis, and they can flag the subtle signs of a problem way earlier than we might have otherwise. The result isn't just better outcomes for patients, it also massively reduces the staggering cost of medical errors.
And just to be clear, this isn't just some theory cooked up in a lab. We know this works because of decades of dedicated, painstaking research from a handful of pioneering medical centers, places like Vanderbilt University and Intermountain Healthcare, who were building and testing these systems long before they were cool. Okay, so if the benefits are so obvious, that leads to the big question, right? Why isn't every single hospital using these systems perfectly and seamlessly? Well, because bridging that gap between a fantastic idea and the messy reality of clinical practice is incredibly, incredibly difficult.
The hurdles are just immense. I mean, first, if you're not careful, you can completely disrupt a doctor's workflow. Then there's this huge problem called alert fatigue. That's where so many little warnings and bells pop up that clinicians just start ignoring all of them, even the really important ones. And behind the scenes, you have this technical nightmare of getting different computer systems to just talk to each other, plus the fact that every hospital needs to customize these things extensively.
But here's the good news. Despite all those challenges, years of research have really boiled down the formula for success. For a CDSS to actually make a difference, its advice needs to have 3 crucial qualities. It has to be automatic, meaning it just shows up without the doctor having to go looking for it. It has to be actionable, offering a clear choice or a direct recommendation. And it has to be timely, delivered right at the point of decision, not 5 minutes too late.
This quote, and yeah, it's from the early 2000s, but it just perfectly illustrates how big that gap was. See, even when hospitals had these systems, most of them were only using the most basic, simple features. All the really powerful, complex alerts, they were often just turned off, precisely because of those challenges with workflow and alert fatigue.
So where is all of this headed? Well, despite the hurdles, we might be moving toward a future where using these systems isn't just considered good practice. It's a legal and ethical requirement. And the legal precedent for that idea? It comes from a very, very unexpected place. Get this. It all goes back to a court case from 1932. It involved 2 tugboats, one of them named the T.J. Hooper. They got caught in a nasty storm and lost all their cargo. And the reason they got caught? They didn't have a simple piece of newfangled technology that could have saved them, a radio to hear the storm warnings.
The court's ruling here was an absolute game changer. The judge, learned at hand, basically said that just because most people in an industry aren't using a new safety device yet, that's no excuse. He established this incredibly powerful idea that an entire profession can be found negligent for failing to adopt a new and necessary safety precaution. So, that old tugboat case suggests a future where using a clinical decision support system might not just be best practice, but a legal and ethical duty of care. And that brings us to the final, critical question for the entire future of medicine. As these systems get smarter and more woven into our care, who is ultimately responsible when something goes wrong? The doctor who used the tool or the code that gave the advice?